The transport ship descended through the artificial atmosphere of Station Theta 9 with barely a whisper. Commander Sareth stood at the docking bay viewport, his amber eyes tracking the vessel's approach with the focused intensity that made his species such effective hunters. His tail swished once behind him, a tell that his mate would have recognized as unease. The Vrexian commander did not like surprises, and humans were nothing but surprises. The Coalition Council had briefed him extensively. Humans came from a planet called Earth, a death world by most civilized standards, gravity slightly higher than standard, atmospheric oxygen levels that would make some species dizzy, predators everywhere from the microscopic to the massive, yet humans had not just survived but thrived, eventually clawing their way to space travel through sheer persistence. Still, looking at the preliminary scans, Sareth could not understand what made them special. No natural armor plating like his own scales, no venom sacs, no razor claws, no enhanced sensory organs that he could detect. Their reaction times were decent but not exceptional. They were relatively fragile, with soft skin that could be pierced easily. By all accounts, they should have been prey animals, not the apex species of their world. The docking clamps engaged with a heavy thunk that echoed through the bay. Sareth straightened his uniform and gestured to his security team. 6 Vrexian warriors, each standing over 7 feet tall, their natural weapons barely concealed by diplomatic dress. It was standard protocol for greeting new species. A show of strength wrapped in courtesy. The airlock hissed open. Sareth expected soldiers, perhaps in powered armor, to compensate for their physical weaknesses. Instead, a single human woman stepped through, followed by 3 others carrying basic equipment cases. No weapons visible, no armor. Just simple jumpsuits in dark blue with Earth's symbol on the shoulder. The woman at the front was unremarkable by Vrexian standards. Average height for her species, which meant she barely reached Sareth's chest. Dark hair pulled back in a practical style, brown eyes that swept the docking bay once, cataloging everything, then settled on him with what looked like mild interest. She smiled, showing her flat teeth, and walked forward with easy confidence. "Commander Sareth," she said, her voice pleasant and unhurried. "I'm Dr. Elena Voss, xenoanthropologist and diplomatic liaison. Thank you for receiving us." Sareth inclined his head, careful not to show too much teeth. Many species found Vrexian grins threatening. "Dr. Voss, welcome to Station Theta 9. The Council has assigned me as your primary contact during the evaluation period." "Evaluation period?" Elena's smile widened slightly. "That's a polite way of saying you're deciding if we're civilized enough to join your club." The bluntness caught Sareth off guard. Most species approaching the Coalition were careful, diplomatic to the point of obsequiousness. This human spoke like she was discussing weather patterns. "The Coalition must ensure compatibility," he said carefully. "Both technological and social. Of course. We understand completely." Elena looked past him to the security team, and Sareth tensed reflexively. His warriors were positioned to look ceremonial, but any trained eye would recognize the tactical spacing. This human should be nervous. Instead, she nodded approvingly. "Good security protocol. The files mentioned your species has a strong protective instinct. It shows in the positioning." Before Sareth could respond, a chittering sound came from the upper gantry. He glanced up and felt his blood chill. 3 juvenile Vrexians perched on the maintenance walkway, their smaller forms barely visible in the shadows. His cubs, what were they doing here? Kresh, his eldest, met his eyes and ducked lower. Good. They knew they had disobeyed protocol, but they would not leave now without causing a scene. Adolescent Vrexians were curious to a fault, a trait that had gotten many of them killed in the old days before civilization. "Are those your offspring?" Elena asked. She was looking up at the gantry with interest, not fear. "They are," Sareth admitted, irritation sharpening his tone. "They were supposed to be in educational sessions. I apologize for the breach of protocol. No need." Elena waved a hand dismissively. "Young ones are curious everywhere. It's healthy." She lifted her voice slightly, not quite calling out, but clear enough to carry. "Hello up there. I'm Elena. Sorry if we're not as exciting as you hoped." The cubs froze. Sareth felt his protective instincts surge. Humans were unknown, untested. If one of the cubs felt threatened, if Elena made a wrong move, if anything went wrong. But Elena had already turned back to him. Her attention apparently shifted away from the cubs entirely. "Should we proceed with the formal introductions? I'm sure you have a schedule prepared." The reception hall was designed to accommodate multiple species, with varied seating arrangements and environmental controls. Sareth had programmed it for Earth-standard atmosphere, slightly uncomfortable for him but manageable. Representatives from 6 coalition species waited, arrayed in a careful social hierarchy that took decades to master. Elena handled the introductions with surprising grace. She did not flinch when the Korthax ambassador extended his crystalline manipulators in greeting. Even though the razor-sharp edges could slice through metal, she bowed at exactly the right depth for the hive-minded Tessari cluster. She even managed to exchange scent markers with the Dulothian envoy, without showing discomfort at the sulfurous smell. But it was her body language that continued to puzzle Sareth. She was alert, responsive, making appropriate eye contact and social gestures. Yet there was a quality of relaxation to her that seemed wrong. Her shoulders were loose, not tense. Her breathing slow and steady. She stood in the center of a room full of species that could kill her in seconds, and she looked like she might doze off. "Your evaluation period will last 30 standard days," announced Counselor Vrethen, a senior Vrexian with platinum scales that marked his age. "During this time you will be observed in various social and professional contexts. The Coalition must determine if humanity is compatible with our values and capable of contributing to our collective goals." "We're happy to participate," Elena said. She paused, then added, "Though I should mention that humans might behave differently than you expect. We have some unusual evolutionary quirks, such as..." Vrethen's ear frills lifted with interest. "We're very good at sleeping in odd places." Elena's expression was perfectly serious. "And we tend to bond with other species easily. Sometimes too easily. Just warning you in advance in case anyone finds me napping in the common areas or befriending your maintenance staff." The statement was so unexpected that several counselors made sounds of confusion. Sareth studied the human carefully, looking for signs of deception or threat display. He found none. She genuinely seemed to be warning them that she might fall asleep. What kind of species admits to vulnerability so casually? The reception concluded without incident, though Sareth noticed Elena's energy seemed to flag near the end. Not dramatically, but her blinks grew longer, her responses slightly slower. When he showed her to the human quarters, specially prepared with Earth-standard everything, she thanked him with obvious relief. "Long journey," she explained. "I'll probably crash hard for a few hours. Is there a common area where I can get something to drink later? I'm always groggy after ship sleep." "The observation deck remains open all cycles," Sareth said. "There are food and beverage dispensers programmed for human consumption." "Perfect." Elena smiled again. That same easy expression that should not exist on the face of someone surrounded by potential predators. "See you tomorrow, Commander. And tell your cubs I think they're impressive climbers." That gantry looked tricky. She closed the door before Sareth could respond. He stood in the corridor for a long moment, his mind churning through the interaction, trying to identify what felt so deeply wrong. His communicator chirped. Kresh's juvenile face appeared on the screen, all wide eyes and pinned back ears that signaled apology. "Father, we're sorry. We wanted to see the human. The files made them sound so strange." "Return to quarters," Sareth said, his tone brooking no argument. "We will discuss this later." But as he walked back toward his office, he found himself wondering the same thing his cubs must have wondered. What were humans, really? They did not act like prey. They did not act like predators. They acted like something the Coalition had never encountered before. In his office, Sareth pulled up Earth's evaluation files again. Hours of behavioral data, biological scans, cultural analysis. Somewhere in this information was the answer. He just had to find it before the humans surprised him again. Outside his window, the station's artificial night cycle began. Lights dimmed across the habitat rings. Most species retreated to their quarters for rest. Sareth worked on, his predator's vision easily handling the low light. He did not notice the small figure that slipped through the corridors toward the observation deck, following the human scent trail with the determination of youth and curiosity. The station's morning cycle brought artificial sunlight streaming through the observation deck's massive viewports. Elena sat with her back against the transparent aluminum, a steaming cup of something brown in her hands, watching the stars beyond. She had been there for over an hour, according to the station logs that Sareth reviewed over his own breakfast. "She just sits," muttered Kresh, hunched over his datapad in the family quarters. His younger siblings, twins named Vera and Salk, leaned over his shoulders to watch the surveillance feed. For hours. Sometimes she talks to the maintenance drones. Yesterday she helped recalibrate the water recycler just by listening to it. Sareth's mate, Thessa, glanced at the screen and huffed with amusement. You three are obsessed. Leave the human alone. Your father said she's here for evaluation, not entertainment. But mother, she's strange. Vera's tail twitched with excitement. She doesn't smell afraid at all. Even when Ambassador Korthax showed his cutting edges, her scent didn't change. How is that possible? It was a good question. Sareth had been wondering the same thing. He had served on Theta 9 for 15 cycles, meeting dozens of new species. All of them showed some fear response when confronted with obvious predators. Elevated heart rates, stress pheromones, defensive posturing, natural responses to danger. Elena Voss showed none of it. Her heart rate remained steady at what medical scans indicated was her resting baseline. Her chemical markers stayed consistent. She moved through the station like she was touring a garden, not navigating a facility filled with species that could tear her apart. Perhaps humans are simply ignorant of danger, Thessa suggested, returning to her own work. Some species lack proper threat assessment. It makes them poor coalition members, but Sareth did not think it was ignorance. He had watched Elena's eyes during yesterday's reception. She tracked movement, noted exits, assessed social dynamics with the skill of a trained observer. She knew exactly where she was and who surrounded her. She simply did not care in the way she should. Kresh, he said carefully, you are not to approach the human. None of you. Is that clear? 3 sets of amber eyes stared at him. Yes, father, they chorused. Too quickly, too perfectly synchronized. Sareth sighed. His cubs were lying. He knew they would try something. The only question was when. The observation deck became Elena's unofficial office. She set up a small portable workstation and spent her days there, working on reports, analyzing coalition data they had provided, and greeting anyone who wandered past. The location choice itself was telling. The observation deck had no tactical value, no restricted access, no privacy. It was the most exposed location on the station. It makes me feel less confined, she explained to Counselor Vrethan during their second-day interview. Humans evolved under open skies. We get uncomfortable in enclosed spaces for too long. Yet your species builds massive cities, Vrethan pointed out. Structures that block out the sky entirely. We do. And we fill them with windows, parks, anything to trick our brains into thinking we can escape if needed. Elena smiled. We're persistence hunters, Counselor. Our instinct is always to have a way forward. Persistence hunters? We don't have claws or venom or thick armor. Instead, we can keep going long after our prey collapses from exhaustion. We chase things until they literally die from being too tired to run anymore. She said it cheerfully, like she was describing a pleasant hobby. Not very sporting, but effective. Vrethan's ear frills flattened slightly. Sareth, listening to the recorded interview later, understood why. The way Elena described it made humans sound less like prey and more like something worse. Something patient and inexorable. The cubs watched Elena constantly. They had discovered that the station's maintenance crawlways provided excellent vantage points, and the humans apparently could not see or smell them at those distances. Kresh kept detailed notes on his datapad, documenting everything. Day 3. The humans spent 2 hours teaching the food dispenser AI how to make better coffee. She talked to it like it was a person. The AI now greets her by name and asks about her sleep quality. Day 4. Human Elena fixed a glitch in the environmental controls for Section 7 just by listening to the air circulation. She said it sounded wrong. How can air sound wrong? Day 5. She fell asleep in the middle of a conversation with the Tessari cluster. Just stopped talking, closed her eyes, and dozed for exactly 20 minutes. Then woke up and continued the conversation like nothing happened. The Tessari seemed impressed rather than insulted. Vera scrolled through the notes, her claws tapping thoughtfully. She's either the bravest being in the galaxy or the stupidest. Not stupid, Salk said quietly. He was the most thoughtful of the 3. Slower to speak, but often more insightful. Watch how she moves. She knows where everyone is. She's just not scared of them. Everyone should be scared of something, Kresh muttered. But he kept watching. On the 6th day, Elena encountered her first real problem. A Dulothian merchant had set up temporary residence on the station, and he took offense to her presence in the common areas. Dulothians were territorial by nature, and he began marking spaces with his scent, including the observation deck during Elena's usual rest period. Sareth received the alert and arrived to find the merchant, 3 times Elena's size and covered in bony protrusions, looming over her while she sat calmly on her usual bench. "This space belongs to Duloth now," the merchant announced in heavily accented Galactic standard. "Human leave. Too soft, too weak, should not be here." Elena looked up at him with those steady brown eyes. "The observation deck is a common area. Station regulations say anyone can use it. Regulations for real species, not for prey." The merchant's chest plates rattled. A threat display. "Leave or I make you leave." Sareth prepared to intervene, his hand moving toward his security controls. Threatening violence against a diplomatic guest was a serious violation. But before he could act, Elena stood up. She moved slowly, deliberately, and walked straight toward the Dulothian merchant. Every instinct in Sareth's body screamed wrong. Prey did not approach threats. But Elena moved with such complete confidence that the merchant actually stepped back, confused. "Here's the thing," Elena said, her voice conversational. "I could leave, but I don't want to. And you're not actually going to hurt me. Do you know why?" The merchant's plates rattled harder. "Duloth stronger. Human weak. Sure, but you're also smart. And you know that if you hurt me, the Coalition will revoke your trading license and ban you from every station in the network." Elena tilted her head slightly. "Plus, you're not really angry. You're testing boundaries because your species values strength, and you want to see if I'll run. I won't. So now you have to decide if you want to escalate this into an actual problem or if you want to share the space like a civilized being." The silence stretched for long seconds. Sareth watched, fascinated as the merchant's body language shifted from aggressive to uncertain. Elena just waited, perfectly patient like she had all the time in the galaxy. Finally, the merchant's plate settled. Human strange, but honest. Duloth respects honesty. He turned and stalked toward the opposite side of the observation deck, claiming a different bench. Elena returned to her seat like nothing had happened. Her heart rate, Sareth noted from the medical monitors, had never spiked above resting levels. That night, Kresh watched the recorded footage for the 5th time. She didn't threaten him back. She didn't show submission. She just waited him out. "Persistence," Salk said softly. "Like she said, humans wait until everything else gets tired." "I want to get closer," Kresh announced. His siblings stared at him. "Just to observe. See if she notices." "Father said no," Vera reminded him. "Father said don't approach. I'm just going to be near her. Technically different." Kresh's logic was weak, and he knew it, but the curiosity burned too hot to ignore. By the 10th day, Elena had become a fixture of station life. The maintenance AI actually got upset when she missed her morning coffee, and the Tessari cluster requested her input on a resource distribution problem because she had what they called an unusual perspective. Even Counselor Vrethan admitted privately that the human was growing on him. "She has a way of making you comfortable," he told Sareth during their daily briefing. "I find myself speaking more casually around her than I do with other diplomats. She listens well. She also sleeps in public spaces at least once per day cycle," Sareth pointed out. "Usually in the observation deck during low activity periods. Is that a security concern?" Sareth considered. "I'm not sure. It should be. But something tells me she's more aware during these rest periods than we assume." He was right. The surveillance footage showed Elena's eyes moving beneath closed lids during her naps, and her breathing pattern changed subtly whenever someone entered her vicinity. She was not deeply asleep. She was in some kind of rest state that still allowed threat monitoring. Humans, Sareth was beginning to realize, did not have the same relationship with sleep that most species did. They did not shut down completely. They just lowered their guard slightly while remaining functional. It was predator behavior, but not the kind he was familiar with. The communal garden was Sareth's favorite part of Station Theta 9. Carefully balanced biomes from a dozen worlds existed in careful harmony, separated by force fields and environmental controls but visible to each other. It was meant to remind diplomatic guests that different species could coexist, despite vast differences. A living metaphor for the Coalition itself. Elena had discovered it on day 15 and immediately claimed a bench near the Earth analog section. Someone had programmed in grass, flowering plants that smelled faintly sweet, and a small water feature that bubbled pleasantly. She spent at least an hour there daily, sometimes reading on her datapad, sometimes just sitting with her eyes closed and her face tilted toward the artificial sun. She's sunbathing, Thessa explained when Sareth mentioned it. Humans need solar radiation for chemical processes in their skin. Vitamin production, I think. They evolved to require sunlight. Many species do, but humans seem particularly dependent on it. The files mention that they suffer psychological distress without regular light exposure. Thessa paused in her work, considering. It makes them seem more vulnerable, doesn't it? Requiring something as simple as light. Sareth thought about Elena walking calmly toward the Delothian merchant, her heart rate never changing. I'm beginning to think vulnerability is complicated with humans. The cubs had become bolder. After Kresh's first close approach, they had ventured nearer several more times. Elena never acknowledged them directly, but small signs suggested awareness. She left her partially eaten lunch on the table once when Kresh was hiding nearby, and he swore she had angled the container so he could see the contents. She hummed sometimes when they were in listening range, soft wordless melodies that seemed designed to be non-threatening. She's training us, Salk said during one of their secret meetings in the crawl space, like we're the ones being evaluated. Don't be ridiculous, Vera scoffed. But her ear frills twitched with uncertainty. Salk had a way of being right about things. On day 17, Elena brought a project to the garden. She spread out datapads and holographic displays across her bench, working through what appeared to be complex mathematical models. Sareth, monitoring from his office, recognized them as coalition resource distribution algorithms, the economic models that kept hundreds of worlds trading fairly. Why is she reviewing those? His assistant asked, peering over his shoulder. She requested access to them, said she wanted to understand how the coalition functions. Sareth watched Elena's fingers fly across the controls, her expression focused. Counselor Vrethen approved it as part of the evaluation. Is she finding problems? Yes, she has identified 3 inefficiency loops in the past 2 hours. Sareth felt his tail swish with something like admiration. Problems our best economists missed. The human worked for 6 hours straight, stopping only to consume nutrition bars and water. As the station's evening cycle approached, she finally leaned back, stretching her arms above her head with an audible crack of joints. Then she slumped against the bench, her head tilting to rest on the backrest, and closed her eyes. Within minutes, she was dozing. The datapads remained active around her, displaying coalition economic secrets while she napped in a public space. Sareth considered waking her. The information was not classified exactly, but it was sensitive. Having it displayed openly seemed careless. But something stopped him from intervening. A sense that this was another test, though he could not say who was testing whom. The cubs appeared 20 minutes later. Sareth spotted them on the surveillance feeds, 3 small forms slipping through the garden's service entrance. They had gotten better at moving quietly, he noticed with professional pride. But they were still juveniles, still driven by curiosity over caution. They approached Elena's bench from 3 directions, a classic Vrexian hunting pattern. Kresh took point, moving directly toward her while his siblings flanked. When they were close enough to hear her breathing, they froze. Elena's chest rose and fell with deep, steady rhythm. Her face was relaxed, peaceful. The datapads glowed around her like guardian spirits. She looked utterly defenseless. Kresh glanced at his siblings. Vera gestured toward the bench, her expression challenging. Salk just watched, his predator's instincts clearly warning him of something his siblings could not sense. Kresh made a decision. He crept forward, placing his clawed feet carefully to avoid sound. When he reached the bench, he hesitated. Elena was right there, less than a body length away. He could see the pulse in her throat, steady and slow, could smell her scent, warm and complex. She was real, tangible, completely unaware, or was she? He remembered the smile from before, the way she had known he was there despite her closed eyes. But this time there was no smile, just sleep. Driven by an impulse he would later be unable to explain, Kresh climbed onto the bench. It was not aggression. It was not hunting behavior. It was something older, deeper, that lived in the core of every juvenile creature. The seeking of warmth, safety, comfort. Elena was warm. He could feel heat radiating from her body. And she smelled safe somehow. Not like prey, not like threat, like pack, like family. He rested his head on her shoulder. The world held its breath. Vera and Salk froze, their eyes wide with horror. In the security office, Sareth shot to his feet, his claws extending reflexively. This was it, the moment where everything went wrong. Humans were untested, their responses to young predators unknown. If Elena panicked, if she struck out, if she hurt his cub. But Elena's breathing did not change. Her pulse remained steady. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then her hand moved. Slowly, gently, it came to rest on top of Kresh's head, her fingers settling between his ear frills with surprising precision. The touch was warm, careful, protective. She murmured something in her own language. Sareth's translator caught fragments. Safe. Just dreaming. Okay. A lullaby, perhaps, or a reassurance. Her thumb moved slightly, stroking the sensitive ridge behind Kresh's left ear, and the juvenile made a sound he would deny later, a chirrup of pure contentment. Sareth was already moving, his security training overriding the shock. He burst through the garden entrance at a run, prepared to extract his cub from a dangerous situation. But when he reached the bench, he stopped so suddenly he nearly lost balance. Elena's eyes were still closed. Her breathing remained deep and even. Her hand rested on Kresh's head with gentle authority. And Kresh, his eldest cub, the juvenile who challenged everything and everyone, had relaxed completely against the human's shoulder. His own eyes were closed. His aggressive ridge was flat. He looked more peaceful than Sareth had seen him in months. What? Sareth's voice came out as a whisper. What are you doing? Elena's eyes opened slowly, like she was surfacing from deep water. She looked at him without apparent surprise, then down at Kresh, then back to him. Oh, hey, Commander. Sorry, I dozed off. Her hand remained on Kresh's head, still providing that gentle contact. Your son was curious. He's been watching me for days. Figured he'd eventually work up the courage to get close. You knew he was there? Of course. Elena smiled. I've known all 3 of them were watching since day 1. They're not as quiet as they think. And humans are really good at spotting things that stare at us. Evolution thing. Had to avoid ambush predators. But you... Sareth struggled to form thoughts into words. You let him approach. He wasn't a threat. Elena stated it simply, like it was the most obvious thing in the galaxy. His body language was curious, not aggressive. His breathing pattern showed excitement, not predatory focus. And his scent, she paused, considering. Sorry, is it rude to mention scent? Some species are sensitive about it. His scent? Sareth managed. Juveniles smell different from adults across most species. Sweeter, less aggressive pheromones. It's an evolutionary safety mechanism, so adults don't accidentally hurt their own young. Kresh smells like a kid, Commander. A curious, slightly nervous kid who wanted to see if I was as strange up close as I seemed from far away. Sareth stared at her, at his son still resting peacefully against her shoulder, at Vera and Salk, who had crept closer and were watching the scene with undisguised fascination. You assessed all of that while sleeping? I wasn't really sleeping. More like resting with my eyes closed. Elena's expression turned apologetic. Humans do that a lot. We call it dozing. We're still aware of our surroundings, just conserving energy. It's actually harder for us to achieve deep sleep than most species. We're too paranoid. Paranoid. The word came out flat. We evolved alongside a lot of predators that hunted us at night. The humans who could sleep through danger didn't pass on their genes, so we developed the ability to rest while still monitoring for threats. She gently shifted Kresh's weight, adjusting her shoulder. It's why you see me napping in public. I'm safe here and my brain knows it, so it lets me rest. But I'm still tracking everyone who comes near. Can't help it. The station sensors show your heart rate barely increased when Kresh climbed onto the bench. Why would it? He's not dangerous to me. Elena looked down at the sleeping juvenile, her expression fond. He's a kid. A curious, intelligent, slightly impulsive kid who reminds me of my nephew back home. Different species, same attitude. Sareth felt something shift in his understanding. You bonded with him. Humans bond with everything, Elena say. The emergency council meeting was called at dawn cycle. Sareth sat across from 3 senior coalition members, each representing different species and perspectives. Councillor Vrethan presided, his platinum scales gleaming under the conference room lights. To his left sat Ambassador Korthax, his crystalline form refracting light in complex patterns. To his right, the Tesserae cluster hummed in harmonic thought. Their collective consciousness focused on the matter at hand. Explain what happened, Vrethan said, his tone neutral but his ear frills alert with interest. Sareth pulled up the surveillance footage and played it without commentary. The council watched Elena doze in the garden, watched Kresh approach and climb onto the bench, watched the human's hand move to rest protectively on the juvenile's head. They watched Sareth's arrival and the conversation that followed. When the video ended, silence filled the room for several long seconds. Remarkable, the Tesserae cluster whispered in harmony. The human demonstrated advanced threat assessment, juvenile recognition protocols, and interspecies bonding behavior simultaneously. Such complexity. She allowed a predator species juvenile to use her as a resting place, Korthax said, his voice like crystal chimes. This indicates either profound stupidity or profound confidence. I have observed her for 18 days, Sareth said carefully. She is not stupid. Then she is confident. But in what? Her ability to defend herself. Vrethan leaned forward. The medical scans show she has no enhanced combat capabilities. A juvenile Vrexian could seriously injure her. I don't think her confidence comes from combat ability, Sareth admitted. I think it comes from understanding. He pulled up additional files, footage he had compiled over the past weeks. Elena fixing the water recycler by listening to it. Elena facing down the Dulothian merchant without weapon or armor. Elena teaching the station AI how to recognize crew moods based on walking patterns. Elena sitting in public spaces, apparently vulnerable, while her eyes tracked every movement around her. She processes social information faster than any being I have encountered, Sareth explained. She reads body language across species barriers. She adapts her communication style to match whoever she's speaking with. The Tesserae cluster said she speaks in harmonics, even though she's a single consciousness. The Dulothian merchant said she smells of truth even though she has no scent glands. She mirrors, the Tesserae observed. Reflects back what others need to feel comfortable. Advanced social camouflage. More than that, Sareth argued. She genuinely connects. My cubs have been watching her. She knew from day one, but instead of reporting them or avoiding them, she courted them. Small gestures, non-threatening behavior, patience until Kresh felt safe enough to approach. To what purpose? Korthax's question cut through the discussion like his namesake edges. Why would a diplomat invest such effort in 3 juveniles? Sareth hesitated, then said what he had been thinking since the garden incident. Because she sees value in every interaction. Because humans apparently don't separate important beings from unimportant ones. Because to her, understanding my cubs was just as vital as understanding the Coalition Council. Vrethan's claws tapped the table thoughtfully. You're suggesting this is species-wide behavior, not individual personality. I've been reviewing Earth's cultural files. Every human society, despite vast differences, shows similar patterns. They form bonds across tribal lines. They adopt other species as companions. They assign personhood to things that are not even alive. Sareth pulled up examples. They name their transportation vehicles. They apologize to furniture when they bump into it. They create elaborate social relationships with animals that cannot speak their language. That seems inefficient, Korthax observed. Perhaps, but it also means they see potential allies everywhere. They don't automatically categorize beings as threat or non-threat, prey or predator. They categorize as known or unknown, and they are driven to make the unknown known. The Tesserae cluster hummed in fascination. We request clarification. How did humans become apex predators of their world with such indiscriminate bonding behavior? That's the question that led me to request this meeting. Sareth pulled up Earth's evolutionary files. I consulted with the xenobiology team. Humans are persistence hunters. They evolved to chase prey over vast distances, across days if necessary, until the prey literally died from exhaustion. He displayed charts showing human endurance capabilities, their ability to regulate body temperature through sweat, allowing continuous exertion, their efficient bipedal locomotion, their capacity to track prey across varied terrain using minimal clues. But here's what makes them truly dangerous, Sareth continued. They didn't just hunt. They studied. Humans can read the body language of hundreds of species. They can predict behavior patterns from limited observation. They can wait for days, weeks, months for the right moment to act. And they never ever give up. He pulled up Elena's file. Dr. Voss has 6 advanced degrees. She spent 20 years studying xenobiology before humanity even achieved faster-than-light travel. She learned 17 theoretical alien languages from mathematical first principles. She prepared for contact with species she had never met by studying Earth animals and extrapolating behavioral patterns. She weaponized empathy, Vrethan said slowly, turned understanding into a tool. I don't think she sees it as a weapon. Sareth thought about Elena's hand on Kresh's head, that gentle protective gesture. I think she genuinely wants to understand. But the effect is the same. She makes you want to trust her. My cubs have been suspicious of every new species they've encountered. They hid from the Tessari cluster for weeks, but after 18 days they feel safe enough to sleep near a human. Because she waited them out, the Tessari observed. Persistence, and because she never pushed, never demanded, just existed in their space until they accepted her presence. Sareth met Vrethen's eyes. Counselor, I believe we have been evaluating the wrong things. We've been testing whether humans can follow our protocols, whether they understand our technology, whether they can contribute to coalition goals, but we should be asking a different question, which is, do we want a species in the coalition that can turn enemies into allies simply by being patient enough to understand them? The silence that followed was heavy with implications. Finally, Korthax spoke. Such a species would be dangerous. They could manipulate social structures, turn coalition members against each other. They could, Sareth agreed, or they could help us understand each other better. The coalition has 17 member species. We have trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, shared technology, but do we actually understand each other? Or do we just coexist in careful separation? The Tessari cluster chimed softly. We acknowledge tension. The Dulothian merchants feel the Korthax traders receive preferential docking times. The Vrexian security forces believe the Tessari clusters receive insufficient support during consensus delays. Small fractures in coalition harmony. Elena identified 3 economic inefficiency loops in 6 hours of analysis, Sareth said. Inefficiencies that our best minds missed because they involved cultural assumptions we didn't recognize we were making. She didn't miss them because she's smarter. She missed them because she doesn't carry our cultural blind spots. She also sleeps in public, Korthax pointed out. Displays vulnerability that could be seen as weakness. Or confidence that could be seen as strength, Vrethen countered. A being who can rest in the presence of potential threats is either foolish or so, certain of her assessment abilities that she knows no threat exists. I recommend we test this. Further, the Tessari suggested. Present Dr. Voss with a complex diplomatic scenario. Observe how she handles it. What kind of scenario? Sareth asked. There is a trade dispute between the Dulothian merchants and the Korthax Manufacturing Consortium. They have been negotiating for 6 months with no resolution. Present it to the human. See if her perspective provides value. Korthax's form flickered with what might have been amusement. If she fails, we have lost nothing. If she succeeds, we gain valuable information about human capabilities. Vrethen inclined his head. Agreed. Commander Sareth, you will present the scenario to Dr. Voss. We will observe her approach. The meeting ended, but Sareth remained in the conference room, staring at the frozen image of Elena with Kresh sleeping on her shoulder. Something about the scene bothered him. Not the interspecies contact, not even the trust it represented. Something else, then it struck him. Elena's smile in that moment, barely visible in the recording. It wasn't the smile of someone surprised by an event. It was the smile of someone whose plan had worked exactly as intended. She had wanted Kresh to approach, had carefully, patiently created the conditions for it to happen. But why? Sareth pulled up Elena's personnel file and read it more carefully this time. Her academic credentials were impressive, but what caught his attention was her work history. Before joining Earth's diplomatic corps, she had worked in conflict resolution, specifically in areas where traditional negotiation had failed and new approaches were needed. Her methodology, according to the evaluations, involved deep observation, patient presence, and what one supervisor called aggressive non-aggression. She would enter hostile situations, appear completely non-threatening, and simply exist until the parties involve. The mediation chamber was designed for tense negotiations. Neutral gray walls, adaptive seating for multiple body types, and environmental controls that could shift to accommodate any species. Elena arrived early, as was her habit, and spent 20 minutes just sitting in the space, breathing it in, understanding it. Sareth watched from the observation booth as she walked the perimeter, occasionally placing her hand on the walls, testing the acoustics with soft sounds. She was mapping the room, he realized, creating a mental model of how communication would flow within it. The Dulothian merchant Groth arrived first. He filled the doorway with his bulk, his bone plates already rattling with defensive aggression. Elena turned to face him, but she did not stand, did not approach. She simply nodded acknowledgement and gestured to one of the larger chairs. "Thank you for meeting with me," she said. "I know this dispute has been frustrating." Groth's plate settled slightly. Human wants to hear Groth's side. "I want to understand what matters to you. Not the contracts or the trade numbers. What actually matters." The merchant settled into his chair, which creaked under his weight. "Korthax Consortium gets prime docking times. Best market windows. Dulothian merchants get remaining slots. Not fair. Not equal." Elena nodded, making notes on her datapad. "The docking schedules were set based on cargo volume, correct?" "Yes, but Korthax ships carry high-value goods. Small volume. Dulothian ships carry bulk materials. Large volume. Schedule favors value over volume. Means Dulothian traders wait, lose time, lose profit. So it's not just about docking times. It's about the underlying assumption that high-value goods deserve priority." Groth's plates rattled with approval. "Yes, exactly. But try telling Korthax that. They say efficiency demands value-based priority. Say it's logical." "It is logical from one perspective." Elena's tone was neutral, not arguing. "But logic depends on what you're measuring. If you measure economic impact per cubic meter, Korthax wins. If you measure total economic impact or jobs supported, maybe Dulothian wins. Human understands." Groth leaned forward, his aggression forgotten. "Coalition measures wrong things. Makes assumptions that favor some species over others." Elena continued taking notes, asking clarifying questions, letting Groth talk until he had exhausted his grievances. When Ambassador Korthax arrived, she repeated the process. The crystalline being was more reserved, more precise in his language, but Elena adapted seamlessly. "The current system optimizes overall efficiency," Korthax explained, his voice resonating through his crystalline structure. "My consortium's goods are time-sensitive. Components for medical equipment, quantum computing elements, items that degrade if delayed. Dulothian goods are raw materials, bulk minerals, refined metals. They do not degrade with time. So from your perspective, the priority system prevents harm. Medical equipment delayed could cost lives." "Precisely. It is not favoritism, it is triage. But the Dulothian perspective is that triage itself is a form of judgment, that declaring some goods more important than others is a value statement." Korthax's form flickered. "All systems contain value statements. The question is whether those values align with optimal outcomes." "Optimal for whom?" Elena asked it gently without accusation. The question hung in the air. Korthax's crystalline structure refracted light in complex patterns, a sign of deep processing. Finally, he said, "I acknowledge the perspective, but I do not know how to resolve it. The docking capacity is limited. Someone must have priority. What if priority changed based on circumstances rather than cargo type?" Elena suggested. "What if the system was more dynamic?" Over the next 2 hours, Elena worked through scenarios with both parties, sometimes together, sometimes separately. She did not propose solutions. Instead, she asked questions that made them examine their own assumptions. Why did the station measure efficiency in terms of economic value? Why not measure in terms of jobs supported or species diversity or some other metric? Who decided that time-sensitive goods were more important than bulk goods? What if there were ways to accommodate both needs? Sareth watched, fascinated. Elena never dominated the conversation, but she guided it subtly. When tensions rose, she would ask a clarifying question or share an observation that shifted the emotional tone. When both parties agreed on something, she highlighted it, building common ground. When they disagreed, she reframed the disagreement as a difference in perspective rather than a conflict of interest. "She's not negotiating," Vrethan said from beside Sareth. "She's teaching them to negotiate with each other." "Humans call it mediation," Sareth replied. "She's not solving their problem. She's showing them how to solve it themselves. Why would she do that? If she solved it directly, she would be the hero. She would gain status, because status isn't her goal. Understanding is." Sareth watched Elena lean back in her chair, letting Groth and Korthax talk directly to each other for the first time in months. She wants them to reach agreement because they understand each other, not because she forced a compromise. That seems inefficient. Maybe, but it might also be more stable. If they feel like she imposed a solution, they'll resent it and each other. If they feel like they found the solution together, they'll support it. The mediation session ended with no final resolution, but both parties agreed to continue discussions. More remarkably, they agreed to continue discussions with each other, not through Elena. She had made herself unnecessary to the process she facilitated. As the participants left, Sareth entered the chamber. Elena was gathering her datapads, looking tired but satisfied. "You didn't solve it," he observed. "Wasn't trying to. I just wanted them to actually talk to each other instead of past each other." She smiled. "Humans learned a long time ago that the best solutions come from the people who have to live with them. My job isn't to be smart. It's to make space for others to be smart. The council will review your approach. They may have questions, I'm sure they will." Elena stretched, wincing slightly. "But I think they'll find that humans are useful in unexpected ways. We're not the strongest species. We're not the smartest or the fastest or the most technologically advanced. But we're really, really good at making friends. Even with beings who don't want to be friends." "Is that what you did with my cubs? Made them want to be friends?" "I gave them space to be curious. Kids are naturally curious. They just need permission and safety to explore that curiosity." She tilted her head, studying him. "You're worried I manipulated them, did you? That depends on your definition of manipulation. I made choices designed to put them at ease and build trust. I was patient and non-threatening. I rewarded their approach behavior with positive interaction." Elena's tone was matter-of-fact. "If that's manipulation, then every parent and teacher in the galaxy is a manipulator. Or you could call it socialization, teaching young beings how to interact with others safely. But you knew what you were doing every step of the way." "Of course I did. I'm a xenoanthropologist. Reading social behavior is literally my job." She met his eyes without flinching. "But knowing what I'm doing doesn't make my feelings less genuine. I really do like your kids, Commander. They're smart, curious, and brave in ways they don't appreciate yet. Spending time with them isn't a chore. It's a pleasure. Even though one of them used you as a pillow?" Elena laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "Especially because of that. Do you know how much trust it takes for a predator species to sleep near someone? Your son paid me the highest compliment possible. He decided I was safe. That's not manipulation. That's connection." Sareth considered this. His training said to remain suspicious, to maintain professional distance. But his instincts, predator instincts that had kept his species alive for millions of years, said Elena was telling the truth. She was genuinely fond of his cubs. She had genuinely wanted to help with the trade dispute. She was genuinely trying to understand the coalition. She was just doing all of it with the calculated precision of a hunter who never missed. "The council will make their decision in 3 days," he said finally, "about humanity's application to join the coalition. I know. Whatever they decide, it's been interesting being here." Elena smiled. "Though I hope they say yes. I've gotten attached to the coffee programming in the dining hall AI. Took me 2 weeks to teach at proper brewing temperature." She left the chamber, datapad tucked under her arm, humming one of those wordless melodies that seemed to calm everyone who heard them. Sareth remained behind, organizing his thoughts for the report he would need to write. The council met in closed session 2 days later. Sareth presented his findings, the successful mediation, the behavioral analysis. The other observers added their perspectives. The Tassari cluster noted Elena's ability to harmonize conflicting viewpoints. Korthax acknowledged that she had found an angle on the trade dispute that neither party had considered. Even the Dulothian merchant sent a formal statement praising the human's listening skills. "She's unusual," Vrethan summarized. "Potentially dangerous in her ability to influence social structures, but also potential